What's happening? Adam Drake here, and today I want to talk about new kit blues. So kind of a weird thing to kind of go over, talk about, but it's a new year. You see a lot of guys at the local tracks running new buggies. And even if it's a buggy that they've used in the past, but it's just a new kit or a new model, you'll hear guys all the time saying like, man, this car just doesn't handle like my old one. And you always want to have a fresh car, everything clean, looking super nice. But from a performance standpoint, there's certain things that need to break in order for the vehicle to have the support, stability, and overall traction. And the main thing would be the drive shafts and also the outdrives. Now, I'm referring to the drive shafts in the front and also the rear of the vehicle, not so much in the center. If you have new drive shafts or new outdrives in the center of the vehicle, typically that's when they're going to work the best because there's going to be the least amount of friction. It's going to allow the center diff to work properly and really smooth and efficient. But in the front and especially in the rear of the vehicle, when everything is brand new, when the outdrives are new and the drive shafts, you're not going to have the mechanical bind or the overall support of the vehicle. So the vehicle is going to want to kind of wiggle, move around a lot more. It's going to feel like the suspension is considerably softer. And that's just purely because the mating surface between the drive shaft pin and the outdrive, and also where the drive shaft and the axle meet, the surfaces are perfect, so there's no friction until you get a little bit of time on it. Now, typically what I like to do when rebuilding my cars, because I'm not one to build new kits pretty much ever, I like to just refresh, rebuild from race to race. There's a couple options you can do. You could either take the outdrives and drive shafts from the front of the vehicle, shift them directly to the rear of the vehicle. You'll want to still keep the right side on the right and the left on the left. Or what I'll do is I will take the front outdrives, because they're already kind of broken in and seated in, and I'll move just the outdrives to the back of the vehicle. Because it's a balancing act. You need the drive shafts and outdrives to be worn in to have the mechanical bind and the traction. But if they get to where they have excessive wear, the vehicle will drive really flat and stiff and can even get to a point where it starts to lose traction because it's just driving too flat. So what I like to do when either rebuilding my car or building a fresh car is I like to mark all of the drive shafts and all of the outdrives. And I refer to them, so the left front is number 1, the right front is number 2, the left rear is number 3, and the right rear is number 4. Now you can mark them however you want, but this is something that's really important. Even if you don't need to change or replace any of the parts when doing a rebuild, you want to make sure that the parts always end up in the same orientation unless you're changing them for newer parts. So what will happen is, say you go drive your buggy for 2 weekends, it's broken in, everything feels great. You come back, you rebuild it, you have all your diffs spread out all over the table. You slap everything back together and the outdrives get mixed up from side to side, or the drive shafts get mixed up. Well, now that mating surface where the drive shafts have been running and kind of taking a set or breaking in are flipped over and they're running on a new surface. So you'll kind of go back through that new car feeling if the drive shafts don't go back in the same orientation. With a new vehicle, new arms, new bearings, things like that aren't really going to have a tremendous effect on the overall handling of the vehicle. If you have a setup that you're really comfortable with and you put new arms on it, it's still going to feel good. Just the arms are maybe going to be a little bit flatter, not have some scuffs or nicks in them. The car is going to handle good. From a handling standpoint, it's really, really important with the drive shafts though, because again, that gives the vehicle its overall support. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a little bit of a closer look, let you see the outdrives and see kind of the wear of some of these outdrives to just give you a little bit more insight, and you'll understand a little bit more what I'm talking about. Again, when everything is brand new, the vehicle is going to feel really soft. It's going to roll a lot. And depending on the class you're running and also your driving style and your setup, you may want newer outdrives or newer drive shafts than some other cars or some other setups. An example would be like a two-wheel drive electric buggy. The vehicles are overpowered, they're very light, and also being two-wheel drive, they're not going to transfer as much weight. So running new outdrives and new drive shafts in most cases will work very good on a two-wheel drive vehicle. It's going to help generate roll, which is going to help get that outside tire to kind of dig into the track and have traction. But in a four-wheel drive vehicle, whether it's 10 scale, 8 scale, nitro, or electric, you're definitely going to want to make sure your drive shafts are broken in to get the optimum performance out of your vehicle. For me, for like the major races, I'll go through, I'll freshen up my diffs, freshen up my shocks, but in most cases, I will recycle or reuse the drive shafts unless it's to a point to where there's excessive wear. That way I have a vehicle or a buggy that looks like it's brand new, but the drivetrain and the drivability when I first throw it on the track is going to handle like my Old Faithful car. Okay, so here's how I mark the outdrives. I simply just take a Sharpie or a paint pen and I'll just go ahead and mark them 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can mark them as A, B, C, and D if you want, or however you want. It's just super important to keep the orientation the same unless you're getting to a point where there's excessive wear. So typically the rear outdrives will wear the fastest because when you're landing on throttle, the rear of the vehicle is going to put the most power to the ground and see the most stress. So if I have outdrives 1 and 2, which would be left front, right front, and then 3 and 4 as left rear, right rear, as the rear outdrives get worn to a point to where I feel I'm starting to lose performance or the vehicle feels too stiff and rigid through the bumps, I'll simply go ahead, get rid of the rear outdrives, and I will shift the front outdrives, again, left front, shift it back to the left rear. The right front, I will shift back to the right rear. And this way I won't have to go through kind of that process of letting the drivetrain break back in. I can put outdrives in that already are seated a little bit. I know some guys will take a Dremel and they'll kind of scuff the outdrives. I'm not a fan of that, but if it works for you, that's totally fine. My main thing with doing that is it's really difficult to scuff and mate the outdrives exactly the same or make them consistent. As far as the drive shafts go, I basically do the same thing. So I will go ahead and just mark them with the number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you can do the same thing. You can shift the front drive shafts once the rear ones get worn. You can get rid of the rear ones, shift the front ones to the back. Because if you put new drive shafts in the front, again, the rear of the car is doing the majority of the driving and putting the power to the ground. So in the front, it's not going to be as noticeable. In the rear, if you were to put brand new drive shafts and brand new outdrives, again, it's going to look like the rear has no support, almost like a dog that's kind of dragging its butt across the carpet. And it's going to be really hard to kind of control the car and to go straight. But you can see here with these outdrives, they're getting to the point where they're pretty worn. I'll try to also include some pictures where you'll see a set of outdrives that has excessive wear. And if the rear outdrives get to where they have really big notches in them, you can actually break the drive shafts, because what happens is as the suspension is going through the travel, this dog bone pin will have plunge, which means where it's moving in and out of the outdrive cup. And if this outdrive cup gets to where it has a big notch, it's going to stop the dog bone from being able to plunge or move in and out of the outdrive. So as the suspension is being forced up and this dog bone is trying to move, it gets locked in that groove and it will basically just break the end of the drive shaft off. Another place where you can check the drive shaft wear is here at the CV joint. You just want to make sure that there's not, any big notches or anything like that, or it's going to affect the ability for the vehicle to go through the bumps. And in the front of the vehicle, it could also reduce steering as you start to see excessive wear there. Another thing that you can do is sometimes if I have used outdrives, but I feel like they're still in good shape, is I will use the Mugen drive shaft pin tool and I will press the pins out, put new pins in, and it's going to give the vehicle a newer car feel or make it go through the bumps better without having to change both outdrives and drive shafts at the same time. Because ultimately that's really the only time that the car is a handful to drive, is because everything, all these parts that are working together are brand new. If you change just outdrives or just drive shafts, it's not going to be as noticeable and the car should still drive really good or kind of break in really fast. So I do the same thing in truck and buggy, nitro and electric, pretty much all my cars, marking the outdrives, marking the drive shafts, trying to stay on top of the maintenance and keeping everything in a range that I feel works well for me. Rhonda prefers to have outdrives that have a little bit more wear. She likes the car to have a little bit more support or a little stiffer feel. So you just have to find what's right for you. Pay attention to the outdrives and the drive shafts when your car is working really good, and try to keep both the outdrives and drive shafts within that wear range that works best for you.